It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And for the first time in Camp Dynasty history, Collin, we are talking Superflex rankings.
We said at the outset that we were going to be a traditional fantasy football show. But, Superflex is kind of becoming the new norm. And traditional fantasy football is being left behind. Does that make you feel anything?
No. Well, it makes me feel sad, maybe, because I like the purity of the one quarterback environment. And of course, if you know anything about Camp Dynasty, you know that we do what is called one quarterback plus, which did we invent that? Because I don't know if anybody else calls it that.
I don't know.
One quarterback plus, which
I'll take credit.
Yeah, we'll take credit right now. It's Camp Dynasty's quarterback scoring. But 6-point passing touchdown, negative 3-point interception. So you have this staggering of top end talent at the quarterback position that makes them inherently more valuable. Not as valuable as Superflex, obviously, but I think it adds a bit of an element to the position that I like. But like you said, Superflex is the direction that we are moving, I think, in fantasy. And while we may not ever become, 50 weeks out of the year a Superflex show, we will give the people one, because they've been asking. And you know what? It's time, like I said last week, step out of the comfort zone and rethink about the 2024 rookie class in a new way.
And I play some Superflex, so I'm familiar. But
Same.
Yeah, it seemed like, back in the day when fantasy football was invented, it was built to mirror real football. So, you had your one quarterback, you had your two running backs, your 2 or 3 receivers, and you had your tight end, and that was it in your defense. And then as it's evolved, we've come a long way from that to including, the flex positions, and then IDP starts to make a little bit of a, showing, which we love. I mean, IDP feels like something that every league should be doing. So then you can be excited when both sides of the ball are out there. And then Superflex comes in because it didn't feel like fantasy football was accurately representative of the value of real NFL players. I think that's kind of where it stems from. And it's like, yeah, quarterbacks, you take them in the 5th, 6th round, you wait on them because you take your running backs and your wide receivers first, because you need 2 running backs, you need 3 receivers, you need to load up on those guys, positional scarcity, and then you wait on quarterback because you only need to have 1, maybe 2, you can have 1 on the bench. Now, Superflex comes in, they become a premium position again. They're going 101 in drafts. I think it's a good thing. I think there's a place for both.
There's a place for both. That's the answer here. We don't need to pick sides. I know it's take season and a lot of what we talk about today, the last time we did a rankings episode was January. That was like film grind season. Since then, we've had all sorts of people catching up in the process. We've had all sorts of takes getting fired off. We are now in full narrative season. So when we talk through these rankings, we'll be doing a top 12. Well, we're gonna run through our top 12, but then at the end we will give 13 through 24. So we will get a full 24, snapshot of where we're at right now in terms of Superflex. But a lot of the conversation, Collin, is now centered around what is happening out there in the world with these players. As the NFL draft gets closer, there's a lot of takes on quarterbacks, and we like to talk about the quarterbacks here, but we're going to get into them a little more in depth today, obviously. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, it felt like in January when we did our rankings last, the takes were a little more ethical. It feels like when you get into like ranking and like you get closer to the draft and people are starting to familiarize, and it feels like there's a lot more bad faith. Like people are putting bad faith takes out there just to like either get a reaction, get engagement, or because they want to be, they're like, oh, I was the first to do this. And there's a little bit of that early in the process, but it feels like it ramps up as you get closer and closer to the draft. And so I just want to say we're staying ethical here at Camp Dynasty. We're staying true to who we are. This is what we do.
You can't shove us around, man. You can't force us to throw out hot takes and be, but
nothing forced here.
Nothing forced at Camp Dynasty, that's for sure. But all right, even if you're not playing Superflex, there are some gems in these rankings because we will also be talking about players that aren't quarterbacks and ranking them. So there is a little bit of insight in terms of has the board shifted for us since January. We got a little glimpse of that last week with the mock draft, but we had 3 boards at play in that environment. So now we will get to just talk through, and let's start number 12 for you, Collin, in this Superflex edition of rankings.
So if you tuned into the mock draft last week, shout out to Caleb for hopping on that one. You will know that I am higher on this player than most, and that is the Hilltopper Malachi Corley, number 12. So he's bottoming out my first round. This is one of, if not the best run after catch player in the draft. And he's a better route runner than he got to show at Western Kentucky. I think this entire offseason has been really kind to him. The pre-draft process, I think he's going to be an early day 2 player. I think teams value what he brings to the table. And he's, 5'11", 210. He's built really well for a player that does what he does. So, like I said, probably higher than most, but when it comes down to brass tacks, the guy is going to get open and he's going to break tackles. And that's what I need my guys to do.
Yeah, mentioned last week when you selected Malachi Corley at pick number 12 that this was something that I think was going to be indicative of the environment with this range of the draft. And even here with Superflex, I'm a little surprised to find out that you do have him at the 12 spot, even in Superflex. But that just comes along with the territory in terms of how many talented wide receivers are in this class and how tightly packed a lot of them are. This is not like, Malachi Corley over X, Y, and Z. Like how, that's crazy. It's like these players are separated by, depending on how you're doing a grading scale or how you're ordering players, like it's pretty tight. Like there's not a lot of separation for me. I'm just looking at my board here between like players from 14 through 26. Those are all very comparably graded players. So that range, a lot of what we will learn about that range will come at the NFL draft. It will become a lot easier to organize that tier and understand how does my evaluation of the talent line up with the situation? And then where do we end on that? So I think we're going to find some answers after the draft, but for right now, I cannot blame you at all for sticking your guy where you think he belongs.
That's right.
For me, I also have a wide receiver at number 12, but this is a player that we have talked quite a bit about. It's Troy Franklin. So Troy Franklin, a player here that in a non-Superflex environment like last week, mock draft, he's going mid-first. 6, I think, is where he landed in our mock. I think I have him at 7 otherwise in a regular rankings. But here coming in at 12, still like Franklin a lot. I know there was a little bit of, weirdness coming out of the combine, I guess. He comes in smaller than, we expected.
Bad gauntlet.
Yeah, the bad gauntlet, and I mean, there was a little bit of weight that I put mostly in the weight of the player. Like, I think it does change a little bit when the guy's not 187, he's 175 ish. And you see some play strength concerns with him. And okay, now we understand why, because he's a very thin receiver. Now, we've had this conversation many times now. What is, undersized? How does it all fit into the equation? Not a player that I'm, sending down the board. When I say he dropped, it means he kind of fell a tier down. I have a couple of wide receivers that I moved ahead of him. He comes in here at number 12, though. Still think he's a first round player, even in Superflex.
Yeah, I got him at number 9. So he's number 6 in my non-Superflex. He's towards the top of my, we kind of have talked about this wide receiver tier in the middle of the first.
Yep.
Through this entire offseason. And he's sitting, right in the middle of that wide receiver tier for me. We'll get into the rest of who those guys are. And it's kind of the same story where these guys are all kind of tightly packed. And things like how big you are. And if you're, a few pounds off of 190 versus a few pounds off of 180, that's a pretty big difference. So, Franklin, that's something that can absolutely move you around the board when the guys are this close in terms of who you like, who you don't. So, yeah, I got him at number 9.
Number 11.
Number 11 is another player in this wide receiver tier. It's A.D. Mitchell.
Okay.
So A.D. Mitchell had a massive combine that, rose his stock, I'd say, in the NFL's eyes. Mitchell's an interesting player, I'd say. He's one of the more enigmatic players for me in the entire conversation of the first round, because there's not a ton of production. There's like an effort question when it comes to down play. And then there's a consistency question. So there's just a lot of questions with A.D. Mitchell. And a lot of the questions are answered by physical traits and like some impressive polish that he shows flashes of. So he's at Georgia for his first 2 years, comes over to Texas, has 845 yards, 11 touchdowns. It's like, oh, all right, so now we got to figure out who this player is. And then he goes and shows out at the combine, and now he's going to get drafted, probably early day 2. And there's going to be a lot of projection here with Mitchell.
Yeah, I mentioned this after the combine when we talked about winners. I said, I don't know if a player won more than A.D. Mitchell for me personally. And that for me meant he's jumping a tier. And that's, the primary movement that I've seen right now in the first round in terms of the guys here that we're talking about is this wide receiver group, which formerly was like Troy Franklin and Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman. A.D. Mitchell was not in that conversation for me pre-combine. He was, I think, number 10 when we talked shortly before the combine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
ages ago.
Yeah, right. It feels like it.
Right.
But right now I have him at number 9 in Superflex. And then just for, transparency, I have him all the way up at number 6 in non-Superflex. So this is a player for me that has risen quite a bit. I do, one of the biggest question marks that I had after watching him was the effort question, because it was very obvious to see on film. And then we mentioned last week, but he gave an answer about that at the combine when a reporter asked him about it, and he gave an explanation for why it didn't look like he was running routes at 100% all the time. And it was because he wasn't running routes at 100% all of the time. I mean, it was plainly that simple. He was making a conscious choice to stay fresh over the course of a drive and over the course of a game by not running routes at full speed when he was not the primary read or he was on the backside of plays. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like that, but it, to me, it makes me feel better that he had a response, that he had an answer, and an answer that like
was a conscious decision. Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't like he was just like, yeah, what are you talking about? I go 100% all the time. It's like, well, you don't. You clearly don't. And so he explained it. He gave his, the reason behind it. I think that transparency for me was like, okay, like we love your talent. We love your athleticism. Like an NFL team is going to get you in the building and say, we got to
run
do
your
this,
routes. Yeah.
So I don't have a ton of issue with it or concern with it. I mean, at this point, so I just love the flashes, like you said, of a player that is, beyond what he showed us in college. He's that ultimate projection piece of like, we never really got to see the full AD Mitchell picture in college, which can be scary, but it's hard not to bet on a guy who is this athletic at this size that's already shown you bits of what could be.
Yeah, and when he's playing with a quarterback that is going to go through his progressions, like an NFL quarterback, I can guarantee you're going to see a different result on a play-to-play basis. And then, like you said, the coaching also, it's going to play a part in that.
So number 11 for me is a player that I just mentioned. It's Keon Coleman. So this was one that we had a nice conversation about with Caleb last week as one of the haters, one of the Keon Coleman haters. We are a pro Keon Coleman podcast, but we are maybe in the minority at this point with that take. So I still have Coleman here at number 11 in Superflex. I still love the allure. I mean, it's like AD Mitchell, but dialed back. Like, you're not getting the same level of an athlete. And when I say that, it's not to say that Keon Coleman is not also an incredibly impressive athlete. It's just that AD Mitchell is like on a different plane of existence. He's one of the most athletic wide receiver prospects in the history of the NFL. So Keon Coleman being not far behind that is still okay. So the 4.640 is the number that everybody's looking at and focusing on. But to me, that's the least important number of his combine because he's not about speed. He's not a receiver that relies on speed. He was able to win without speed, playing at a high level of college football for a national championship contender in Florida State. Yes, it's a little hot and cold this year. We've talked about, why that doesn't bother us a ton. Meat left on the bone. It's the motto here for Keon Coleman. But I said last week, I'm not abandoning this ship. I still have a lot of faith in this player, and I love what he can become. And so I'm going to keep drinking the copium juice.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think you knew that already, though. Coleman is at the top of this wide receiver tier for me. He's at number 8 for me in our Superflex rankings. He's my number 5 in regular rankings. So I love this player. And the more that people are out on him, the more I dig deeper. The hole that they're digging for him, I'm just going and pouring dirt back in. I'm taking it from the pile that they're digging. And so, man, it's just, I think I'm just watching a different guy than everybody else is where I'm landing. 'Cause I am excited about his physical traits. I like his contested catch stuff. The numbers were hit and miss this year compared to last year, but you can see it, man. The guy's got great hands. He's got an incredible vertical. Like, this is a guy that you want making plays for you in the red zone. It's somebody that can do things after the catch impressively. It's a guy that can create separation. Like, I've heard Quentin Johnson around his name, and like, I don't want to be like, we're out on Quentin Johnson after 1 year. Like, I know it was ugly, but he's also not Quentin Johnson. So all that being said, I am a big fan of Keon Coleman. And, you know, if Keon Coleman's fan club is gone, it means I am dead.
I mean, I do feel like it's important to say, like, we try to archetype guys as much as possible. We try to make them make sense in the context of what we've seen before, because that's how we work as humans. Like, when I'm watching a player, I'm like, okay, he reminds me of X. I know that works in the NFL. Keon Coleman, I think, is a player that is getting inaccurately archetyped based on a certain part of his game.
Right.
Like, I really do feel like he has been boxed into the, like, can't separate, only contested catch guy. And now that's just like the common sentiment when you talk about Coleman. It's like, oh, he's great in contested situations, but not a great separator. And like, I really agree with you sometimes where it feels like I'm watching a different player. Like a player that's separating better than people are telling you, that honestly isn't as dominating in contested situations as people are telling you. Like, he's got the highlights. He absolutely does. That's part of the appeal, is like, man, he can do that. He can jump that high. But when you look at the numbers side of it, it wasn't as imposing as it seemed. But every time I think about him, I go back to that very first game of the year. And that might sink me in the end. When watching him against LSU to start this year, I had visions of a player that could become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I know that the season didn't continue on that trajectory, but it's hard to let go of that idea once you've seen it in the player. You've seen him operate at a level where you're like, you could be something really special in the league. So, all right. Where are we at? You're number 11.
My number 10.
10. Your number 10
is Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay.
All right. So we're still working our way through this wide receiver tier. Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of similar to how I feel about A.D. Mitchell. He kind of came out of nowhere this year. You know, he was around with LSU last 2 years. He had around 350 yards each of the last 2 years. And then he has his breakout with this crazy LSU offense, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns. And it's like, oh my God, who is this guy? And he is, I mean, just a really impressive receiver that if he gets his, if the skills that flash get honed in, he could easily be a number one wide receiver for a long time in the NFL. If those skills don't get honed in, he could easily be a really good number two receiver in the NFL for a very long time. So I think that there's a pretty high floor with Brian Thomas, honestly. Like, I don't know if it's a really high fantasy floor, but I feel like it's a guy that's going to stick on NFL rosters because of what he brings to the table in terms of being a downfield winner and a contested catch winner. Now, if he can, take those route running skills where it's like, oh man, that was really cool, do that all the time. If he can do that, then it'll change from like, hey, this guy's interesting, like, will he ever be the guy, into like, oh, Brian Thomas Jr. is like good, putting up 1,200 yards a season. So I think he's capable of that. I think there's a little bit of need to take a little bit of sandpaper and clean this up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these players that we're talking about in this range here, the Colemans, the Mitchells, Brian Thomas Jr., there is an element of projection to all of these players. There are wide receivers in this draft that I feel there is minimal projection. Like they are ready to go. Brian Thomas Jr. for me is my favorite player of this tier. And I have him in Superflex at 8, and I have him at 5 in regular one quarterback. And I really think that the point that you just made about the high floor, his floor in the NFL, I think it is very high. And that's something that allows me to feel very comfortable ranking him as the next guy behind this group of players that is like way ahead in terms of the wide receiving talent and the tight end that we have in this class. And in this case, some of these quarterbacks, I really think he's a player that's in the league for a while. Mm-hmm. Now, the ceiling question is where it gets really interesting, because if you see that development, like you said, if he develops into a more complete route runner, if he is a player that is running at all levels of the field, running routes at all levels of the field, over the middle, working intermediate, getting a little tighter on his, we see him running a lot of curls at LSU, and they're not always like super clean. And you do have to give these guys a little bit of the benefit of the doubt sometimes when you're talking about a player who's very large, like 209, 6'3", like I sometimes even I am like, I can't expect you to look like Ladd McConkey out there, like it's just not going to happen. But there is some refinement that is needed with Thomas as a route runner. But man, that 4.33 number, it's hard to ignore. And especially when you take into consideration his size and how young he is and how much more development is in store for this player.
Absolutely.
Number 10 for me, here we go. It's Superflex show, right? Let's talk about a quarterback. Michael Penix Jr.
Hell yeah. All right.
Let's talk about it. You have him in the first round?
I don't.
Where do you have him?
I have him at 15.
Okay. I love the player. And right now we are living in a vacuum. Like this is completely independent of landing spot. And I could, you could listen to the noise and the chatter right now and say, well, Penix, not exactly looking like a first rounder, probably more of a second round pick in the NFL. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know. We have no idea if he's a first, second.
Hey, Will Levis at this time last year was locked and loaded top 5.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So we know nothing. We just need to remind ourselves of that.
Exactly. We are more than a month out from the draft. We know nothing right now. And so for me, I am ranking these players in terms of what I've seen on film from them. And what I've seen from Penix is an NFL starting quarterback, a player that I am comfortable taking in the first round of the NFL draft. I think his arm is worthy of being in a different conversation than he's currently being talked about. He is getting lumped in with names that I'm like, I don't feel like we're talking about the same level of arm talent with players that are being talked about with Penix. We're hearing so much about the top guys, and for good reason. And we're hearing a lot about these, middle tier quarterbacks, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy. Like those are the names that are being pushed up into the, upper echelon of the first round in mock drafts. But in my opinion, it should be Michael Penix. I don't think Michael Penix and Jayden Daniels are that far apart in terms of my NFL evaluation for them. So in that case, right now, I'm taking him at number 10 in a Superflex.
I like that. I mean, I think I have, like, it's hard to separate what you're hearing all the time and how you felt like, 3 months ago. Because if this was 3 months ago, There's no world where I would have told you I'm like, yeah, no, I'm taking Jayden Daniels over Michael Penix, because I mean, Michael Penix is one of my guys and has been through this entire thing. It's like, man, the arm talent, like you said, is NFL arm talent. And the thing that really prevents Penix from moving up into the first round for me is I don't think that he's going to be starting year one, is kind of the vibe I'm getting. And we were supposed to not think about that when we were making these rankings. And that's why I'm like, it's hard to separate it. But also, there's a capped mobility part of this, where it's like Penix just doesn't really move very much at all. And like, he moves in the pocket, but he doesn't run. So you're not getting that extra bonus that if the passing doesn't look as clean, he doesn't have that rushing to fall back on. So that's what keeps him out of the first for me.
What is the spot? What is the spot that you want Penix to land in?
I mean, it depends a lot on who ends up like trading up and all that stuff, but I wouldn't mind seeing him like in Las Vegas or Minnesota. I wouldn't even hate if he was like the Rams backup for a year and ended up being, because he has kind of a little bit in common with Matt Stafford, if we really want to think about it, like Matt Stafford. I would say one of those three would probably be like, hey, this is kind of nice. What about you?
I like Las Vegas. I think there's opportunity available to him immediately, potentially. I mean, we got Gardner Minshew. Great. That's not moving the needle for me. Yeah. So I think that's the spot. I know Seattle is like the easy one because we got the OC from Washington in there now. Geno Smith kind of, maybe at the tail end of things.
Like a high-level bridge quarterback, Geno.
Right. But now, who is the second guy they just brought in? I'm completely blanking.
Yeah. Doesn't matter, apparently.
Certainly not. Sam Howell.
Oh, well, that's not a real player.
So, yes, forgettable player.
Yeah.
Sorry to the Sam Howell hive. But
Sorry, UNC fans.
Yeah.
We'll appease you later.
Yeah. Probably no longer in the running, I would say, in the range for a guy like Penix, but sneaky. And I don't think it's going to happen, and it shouldn't happen because this team needs to just load up and go for it right now. Falcons.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Jets.
Ooh, I hate that either. But yeah, no, the Falcons will probably get at least 2 years out of Kirk. That's too much time for Penix to sit. I take it back. Let's go to Vegas.
How do you feel about the Giants? And just have him take Dan Jones's job and pair up with Malik Nabers or something.
I mean, I would love that to happen.
Right.
I'm looking at 7. That's where the Giants pick in the second round. They do not have their own second round pick. I think it takes a jump from 47.
Yeah.
So they have to be like prepared to take this player like in a trade up scenario. I don't know if that but this is the thing with this draft this year is like there are so many unknown scenarios of like how much does X team value a quarterback?
Right.
How much does X team want to pay to jump up to get a quarterback? Like there's so much unknown still, which is why I still think there's a world where Penix goes top 15. I don't think it's out of the question that he goes top 15.
I don't think it's out of the question. I think there's plenty of teams that have fine quarterbacks right now that would love to get a guy with upside. And I know Penix maybe like isn't the poster child for like upside because he's older and he's got an injury history, and I don't know how much more like development you're getting out of him. But a guy that can be your backup and like either give your starter a run for his money in camp or just straight beat him out. Because like I can imagine New Orleans bringing him in wherever they're drafting. I know they're top 15, and just going straight head to head with Derek Carr and being like, God, this guy's a live arm, and Derek Carr like check down king, whatever. But like this guy can get Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave the ball down the field. Like, let's see this happen. So, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where Penix is in a fun situation, has a chance to start, and I hope he ends up in one.
Amen to that. Who is your number 9 player?
Number 9 is Troy Franklin.
There. Oh, that's right.
Yep.
So number 9 for me then is
Yes.
AD Mitchell. So
All right.
number 8 for you
is Keon Coleman.
And number 8 for me is Brian Thomas Jr. Man, look at us.
All right, we're just cruising through this thing. So I'll go to number 7.
Yeah.
And that is a new player that we haven't talked about. Number 7 is Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. So this is getting into holy hell, this guy's available at 7 kind of range.
Yeah.
And that's why Superflex is a lot of fun, because this kind of stuff can happen. Bowers, I don't know, like, I don't know what to talk about at this point with Bowers. Like, we're so late.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. What did I say when we started? It's narrative season.
Yes.
So first and foremost, what is the spot? Because I don't think anybody really understands right now what the range is for this player. I think the latest thing you've heard a lot of is the Jets, which is something that they were a suitor on perfect matches. We didn't explore that pathway, but they're in the mix. I don't think LA at 5 is in the mix anymore, personally.
No, I agree.
They might trade down.
Yeah.
They could trade down and get him. That's a possibility. But
yeah, it seems like the common sentiment is that he's going to end up falling out of the like top 9, which is that range that I was thinking he'd end up in because of who he is. But I mean, if he's going to end up, and I said this on the Perfect Matches episode, it's like, if one of these teams in this, like, 13 through 18 range ends up with him, like, that's not great for everybody else. Because you look at the Raiders, who won't take him because they just got Maye. But you look at the Saints, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Jaguars, the Bengals, all those teams need a tight end. So, I mean, the Raiders might just want to trade down to whoever wants to come up and get Bowers before that run of teams needs one. Because, I mean, Saints, Juwan Johnson, fine player, not Brock Bowers. Colts, Kylan Granson, whatever. Seahawks,
Cox slander on this podcast.
Yep, sorry, apparently. Mo. Anthony Richardson and Brock Bowers, Jonathan Taylor, like, hello, a lot of good athletes right there. Michael Pittman, but the Seahawks, Noah Fant, like, maybe 5 years ago that means something. And then the Jaguars, like, they just re-signed Evan Ingram, but we know Doug Peterson likes tight ends. So all of those teams are like, and then obviously the Bengals are the Bengals. So any of those teams, if that's where he ends up, I feel incredible about it. I feel great about any team that he ends up on. So I don't know why he would fall this far, but if he does, like, he's going to end up in a great spot to produce year one, and he has all the tools to put up, like, 800-900 yards year one. And I'm going to say that because I don't want to set expectations crazy high, because people love to do that and be like, yeah, he'll be the best rookie tight end of all time. But I won't put that pressure on him.
Yeah, that was my next question, is there a spot in the range that you would not like to see him go, and I don't think there is.
Maybe the Broncos?
Yeah.
Just because it's so dysfunctional right now?
Yeah. And that's exactly why I don't think they do it. I mean, maybe Sean Payton is like that unhinged
Get
about
my
it.
Jimmy
but
Graham.
Yeah, there's so many other needs that team has, including quarterback. So I don't know. I don't think there's a spot for me that I'm like, I don't like this. I think Bowers, like, think if you don't want to think about him as a tight end, which this didn't really work out for Kyle Pitts in the end, but like, think about him as a slot. Think about him as a slot wide receiver.
Yeah.
And you're kind of the plane of thought is different, because you're like, if a team's drafting him, we're going to play him in the slot quite a bit. He's going to be one of the focal points of our offense. He's a tight end in name only, which is kind of what Kyle Pitts was during his rookie year. Like, he was playing a lot out wide from the slot. There wasn't a lot of inline work. I think Bowers, I mean, if a team is smart, you can use him in a similar way and maximize his athleticism and his skill set and match him up against smaller players. I don't think there's a bad spot. So I also have him at 7, by the way.
All right. Oh yeah.
Which means number
6. Number 6, I have my first quarterback in the first round, Drake Maye. Ooh. Okay. So Drake Maye, what do you have him higher?
I got him higher.
Okay. So we'll wait and talk about him when we get to your spot. How about that?
Well, I think we're going to have to talk about him right now, because my number 6 player is Jayden Daniels.
Okay. He's my number 5 player.
Okay. So this is the conversation, and this is the conversation in the NFL world right now too. So this is great, actually, that we get to do this. But I am a little bit shocked that you have come this far with Jayden Daniels.
Me too.
To put him over Maye. That is shocking to me.
It hurt a little bit to do it, but so the way I feel is that Jayden Daniels can be at least what Justin Fields has been, which is an incredible fantasy asset.
Not anymore.
Well, okay. So for the last, 4 years. And Fields might start next year. So I don't know if that's true or not, because we didn't get into the free agency stuff, but Russell Wilson is cooked, man. Like, there's a very real possibility Fields overtakes him. But the reality of it is he's going to have a chance to succeed. When I had Jayden Daniels ranked so low, it was totally independent of what the NFL thought of him, because it was January and there was no real draft projections. There's no real smoke. And it's now he's going number 2 or 3 overall. And he's going to be the franchise. At least he's going to get the keys to the franchise. And at the time, it's Jayden Daniels, maybe late first, early second is where I still kind of feel that way about the player. But if he's going to be running around starting for an NFL team, he's going to put up the numbers. So Drake Maye, I'll talk about him because that's where we are right now. Drake Maye, I think, is a great player that has some footwork issues that can be fixed. And it's a little bit, he throws quite a few bad passes because of the footwork stuff. There's some ducks. He doesn't get the full usage of the arm strength that you see, but I don't know. It's so close with these two guys, and the weaknesses for both are similar. But Jayden Daniels just has quite a bit higher of a rushing upside, which has come to light. And I don't know, man. It's so close with these two guys.
I really do, and I'm not. You're definitely correct. Like Jayden Daniels has a higher rushing ceiling than Drake Maye. That is absolutely true. I also think people have no like the lack of respect for Maye's rushing ability has been one of the most shocking parts of this like draft cycle for me, just in the NFL world, because I think you're getting so many people that have boxed him in to a certain mold of a player. And it's like, it's gotten to the point where when the Commanders signed Marcus Mariota, it's like, well, they're taking Jayden Daniels at number 2, obviously, because he's the run. It's like, first and foremost, Drake Maye is an infinitely better runner than Marcus Mariota is at this point in his career. I mean, did we watch Mariota play in Atlanta? Because he wasn't running around too much.
No.
But I really do feel like there's a rushing element of Drake Maye's game that is being overlooked. And, you know, I have him at number 3. I have Drake Maye as my number 3 player in Superflex. I still feel about him the way that I felt about him when we talked about quarterbacks all the way back in January, which is he is a special talent at the position. I mentioned last week something working against him as opposed to some of these other players, including Caleb Williams to an extent, is that he is extremely young and extremely inexperienced relative to the rest of this class. I mean, he is like almost a full year younger than even Caleb, and he's like 3 years younger than Penix and Daniels. So there is so much with this player that right now I think is just unseen, which, yeah, that can be scary from a quarterback. I mean, we know how hard it is. I mean, hello, look at 2020, the Lawrence class.
Yeah.
Look at that class and look at how confident we were that was a good class and where we sit today. It's not an easy position is the point. And I'm not saying Maye is bust proof. I'm saying what I've seen from this player suggests that he has an incredibly high ceiling in terms of becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And from a fantasy perspective, I don't think that his rushing ability right now it's not something that separates these two for me, like Daniels and Maye. I still trust the talent of Maye, my evaluation of him as a passer, enough to put him a few spots ahead of Daniels, even if there's a slightly higher rushing ceiling with Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, so it was a 2021 class. That was the Trevor Lawrence class.
Yeah.
And so just real quick aside, Bing is the search engine that automatically comes up on my computer.
Oh God.
So it gives you, the first thing it gives you is an AI generated result, which I love. It's perfect. Sarcasm. So it says the following quarterbacks were drafted in the NFL draft, and it's Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones. And it says the quarterback class can be re-ranked as follows. And then it's just Trevor Lawrence 1, Justin Fields 2, and it stops. AI knows.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions, and like if there was a ranking that I had the most trouble with, it was between these two guys. So yeah, it's all going to come down to preference, and this is going to be a question that NFL GMs are going to have to answer for, the next 3 months, the next month and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Commanders and Patriots are going to have to answer some pretty serious questions about their franchises and who they want running them. And the age point is a big thing because Maye has more time to kind of cook. He has some, and Daniels is like, I don't know how much better Daniels is going to get because he's gone through such an arc in his college football career already. where he started out at Arizona State, kind of really not good. And then he developed into last year, who we were like, oh, we have some questions about Daniels, we don't know about him. And then this year, like, here we are. Like, Daniels is a starting caliber NFL quarterback and maybe more than that. But Drake Maye, he's a young guy with a ton of potential, and he shows everything you want in, that raw form. Like, this is a player that you can build up into a really impressive NFL quarterback. Now, the biggest question I have with Drake Maye will end up being landing spot, because as a 20-year-old who needs a little bit of, TLC, if you end up on the Commanders with a coaching staff that we have questions about, to say the least, or the Patriots, who are undergoing a complete haul of their, coaching staff and front office, like, there are some questions to be had with a young player who needs some development versus Daniels, who, like, if nothing else, is who he is, and, like, that's okay for fantasy.
I gotta say, I don't love this as a Packer fan, because the Bears are already getting Caleb Williams, but I love the idea of the Vikings making a huge offer and getting Drake Maye, because that pairing, this offense with Kevin O'Connell, I mean, it is truly like the best case scenario. You could feel very comfortable that he'd be developed properly there. He could sit behind Darnold, at first. If I don't think it would come to that, but if it was necessary, it could happen. That's why Darnold's there. But that's what I'm rooting for.
And it does sound like, and this is all probably smoke at this point, because there's no real news that comes out, but it sounds like Jayden Daniels has kind of overtaken Maye as the number 2. And again, this is all speculation, whatever. But if that's the case, I think there's going to be teams very excited to trade up with the Patriots to get number 3. And there's the report that also came out, like, oh, if Daniels isn't at 3, the Patriots are going to trade down. So,
which I again, like, I don't understand. I don't know why the Patriots,
and it's probably not true
to move. That's the thing. Like, how much do we really know at this
exactly
point? It's very, very muddy. It's going to be fun.
It's a lot of speculation, and I'm just excited for it to be here.
I also do want to correct myself. Jayden Daniels is only 2 years older than Drake Maye. He is not 3 years older. So that is important. And also, I do feel the need to say something positive about Jayden Daniels, because this became a Maye versus Daniels conversation. And I still have Jayden Daniels at number 6. So,
and I have him at 5. It's not like,
right.
We're pretty close.
We're in the ballpark. It was like, I love Drake Maye. That there was a time when I would have maybe taken him above Marvin in this class. I ultimately don't go that direction. He's at number 3. Jayden Daniels, though, I think the upside is the allure in terms of his rushing ability. I think he's a much improved passer, especially from last year to this year. I think that level of growth that we saw was something that makes me more comfortable saying, I think, I still don't, I've said this many times, I don't feel like he's a top 10 pick in the NFL on a talent basis. I don't feel like that is accurate, but I can understand the draw and why a team is drawn to him, especially considering that he showed us that he was still improving as a passer last year. So I still have questions about it. I still have questions about his processing ability, his ability to work the middle of the field. There are questions with him as a passer. That is absolutely true.
I think it's funny that we're here.
Run this back go back to quarterbacks 2.0 at the beginning of January.
What you're saying is what I was saying, literally, which I still believe.
Yeah.
But I just think it's
Literally.
funny that you're the one that's putting it out there now.
I know.
That you're doing the slam piece on Jayden Daniels.
That's why I was so shocked that you had him at number 2 in this class, because we've now made it full circle, or maybe 180. Is that more accurate? I don't know. But anyway, regardless of the question marks I have with Daniels, I think he is stepping in, like you said, with the opportunity to show what he has. And I think the rushing ability that he has is rare. And I think it sets him up with a high floor. And we know that that's not everything. You have to be able to pass. You have to be able to survive as a passer to play quarterback long term in the NFL. But
also, Jayden Daniels got to learn how to slide.
Well, that too. He also has to learn how to survive as a runner, because he's. So there's questions, but it's the upside. It's the upside thing here with Daniels. He's the running quarterback here. There's other guys that have the skill. Nobody has it like Daniels. So that's why we're up here. And in some cases, Superflex drafts, he might be going even higher than this.
I mean, there's people that are putting him as their number 1 quarterback in Superflex rankings, which, like, if you don't like Caleb Williams, like, sure, whatever. Like, you're going to take your number 1 quarterback at number 1. Okay.
Yep.
And he's got the rushing upside, and if you trust the passing will improve, there you go.
All right. So
you're number 5.
Yeah, number 5 for you was Jayden Daniels. And so here's where we get to talk about players that we are very familiar with.
Yes.
Odunze is my number 5 player here. No surprise. I mean, this tier of receivers is pretty established, well documented at this point. They're getting all the headlines, all the press. It seems like even, we're falling in love with a guy like Odunze even more. But then right when that's happening, now we got more chatter about Malik Nabers. Maybe he's the wide receiver 1. So, like, the bottom line here is that these receivers are all really, really good. And in Superflex, if you're sitting at number 5 and you're ending up with Odunze out of this thing, and maybe even lower. I mean, Jayden Daniels could go above him in certain cases. You might get a player like Odunze as far down as 6. So it's a testament to how special this group is at the top end. And, what else is there to say? What else is there to say?
So I have Odunze at 4. I just think he's going to be a team's number 1 wide receiver. It's like this NFL draft class is almost, I have a feeling it's going to start out almost like a actual Superflex fantasy draft where it's going to be like quarterback, wide receiver, and then like the draft starts after that. I would not be surprised. And like, it probably won't actually happen that way, but there's a very realistic world where that could happen. And that's because of these next, 3 guys in my list. And Odunze starts that off, where he could go to any situation and thrive because he does so many things well. But he also could be, a wide receiver 1 in a lot of these situations. And I say he could thrive anywhere because he could be a great number 2 wide receiver, because I think he has a lot of complementary skills and he can play opposite a wide receiver 1, and he can defer to like Jalen Polk or Jalen McMillan if one of them has the hot hand. So any of these landing spots I'd be thrilled with. I just want him to get paired with a decent quarterback. That's all I ask. And that's with any wide receiver, because they're completely dependent on who's under center.
Yeah. And even then, though, it's like, I feel like this caliber of a player, it's like hard for me to even be like,
I'm not gonna downgrade him.
Yeah, like you're with Daniel Jones, like you're screwed. Like I think this is the kind of player that elevates a Daniel Jones. And like that's actually what I want to ask you, because we talked about all these players that are coming up here on perfect matches only a month ago. Do we still agree New York Giants, number 6. Do we like the fit?
I still like the fit. I mean, they need a guy, man.
Yep.
That's really what it is. And Odunze can be a guy.
He can be a guy. He can be more than a guy.
That's
and
right.
so can this player. Malik Nabers, number 4 for me. Number 3 for you.
Yep.
So what's the chatter? Now we got Jeremiah saying, well, don't be surprised when he's wide receiver 1 in the NFL draft. So I don't know what's going on, at the top here.
It's smokescreen season for the NFL draft is what's going on.
Yes, but there has been a prolonged period of time where these sorts of people are coming out and saying, I know NFL teams that have Nabers as wide receiver 1. I think it's real. I think there are teams out there that value the skill set of Nabers. And I talked a little bit about why that might be the case. I think it was last week, because he's offering you something that you're not really getting with Marvin or Odunze, which is this dynamic and electrifying yards after the catch potential, which is the direction that we're heading in the NFL. So if you're trying to add a playmaker, a dynamic open field playmaker that can separate at all levels of the field, make it real easy to get the ball into his hands and let him go to work from there, you might like a guy like Nabers even more than the chosen one himself. So I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's real in the sense that he will be the wide receiver 1 taken in the draft. But it just goes to show how talented this player is still, even with another player ahead of him in his position group.
Yep. And so there was a time where I was like, well, the Chargers aren't going to go wide receiver. Well, they might just need to. They might need to just to fill the roster because they haven't brought back Mike Williams. He's still a free agent. And they traded away Keon Allen to the Bears. So
they cut Mike Williams, so I don't think he's.
That's back. Right. That's right. And so he's not coming back. Keon Allen got traded, so they got Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer. So no matter how you feel about Quentin Johnson, that's not a real wide receiver room. So they might have to go receiver at 5 here. And if what we think is true, our number 1 wide receiver will probably be gone at that point. So Malik Nabers, hello, you get ready-made Justin Herbert for, I mean, that's a nice pairing. We've been asking for a guy that can add a little juice into this Chargers offense, and can't do a whole lot better than Malik Nabers.
I mean, it's the best case scenario for fantasy. It really is. We assume
he would have 300 targets.
Wide receiver 1 goes to Arizona. Awesome. Paired with Kyler, clear number 1 option, immediately elevates the offense. Wide receiver 2 goes to LA, the spot that we've been asking for a wide receiver to go to. And when Quentin Johnson went there last year, it was like, oh, damn, this might be the perfect spot for Quentin. Well, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. But this is where I think I changed my mind a little bit from when we talked about fits, because we had the Bears as the perfect fit, and obviously, still a great fit.
Yeah, but a lot has changed since then.
A lot has changed. And I think a player like Nabers, I mean, he is the Keenan Allen to this offense. He is 160 targets, just feed him the ball, always open, underneath, deep, all levels of the field. I mean, he can be that player for the next 10 years. Keenan's been doing it for maybe even more than 10 years. 11. I think he was
right. He's
a rookie when I had my first Dynasty startup. Look at how far we've come. Keenan Allen now getting traded for a 4th at the end of his career.
And before you go and mention something, he's not saying that Malik Nabers is anything like Keenan Allen.
No, it's not.
I know. That's what I just want to make sure that that's clear, that it's not a comp. It's a role in the offense where Malik Nabers will be the number 1 target earner in the offense. And
Keenan
that
Allen,
would
but
go.
juice him up with like
Yeah, he's Keenan Allen, but
2/10 of
fast
speed.
is what
Yeah.
we're saying.
Yeah. Keenan Allen ran what, a 4.6?
Yeah.
We don't know what Nabers ran, or will
4-1.
run. But maybe, yeah.
I think he's a 4-1 player.
4-1, 6'4", 226.
Yeah.
We don't know. So who are we to say? Yeah. But all right. Nabers, Odunze, of course, we have two players yet to talk about, and it starts here, I think. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my number 2 player.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have blamed you.
No,
I wouldn't have blamed you. But because I actually do have a higher grade on Marvin than I have on Caleb for the NFL.
Right.
Like, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in the draft class. But I also think Caleb Williams is a really special talent, and we're playing Superflex. So I'm going to go ahead and put him at the number 1 spot, the negligible difference in grade, and just say that, man, this is a hell of a number 2 pick because Marvin Harrison Jr., again, not much more that needs to be said. This player particularly, we've literally been talking about him since last summer as the guy. Guys like Nabers, Odunze rising through the year, establishing themselves as premier talents. Marvin started there and he didn't go anywhere. So all that's left to know is where he's playing in his NFL career. I'm holding out hope, man. Arizona, get this man into that offense, pair him with Kyler. It makes this perfect. The harmony of this situation, of the level of talent meeting with the perfect situation, I need it.
Yeah, this would be ideal, and I hope that they don't trade back, because they did a lot of that in the 2023 draft, the Cardinals, to kind of stockpile some picks, and I hope that they just kind of stick and pick here, because this is the ideal situation for to kind of accelerate your rebuild. I don't know they're kind of like retooling on the fly because they already have a quarterback, and they already have a quarterback on his second contract, so they don't really want to be rebuilding. They just kind of got to build up this roster, and a good way to do that is to get this guy in the room. So if it goes quarterback, and the Patriots don't end up trading out and somebody moves up for Marvin and they end up with him, it would be perfect. Like this is, when we talk about perfect matches, like this is about as good as it gets. So this would be good for Kyler. This would be good for Marvin. This would be good for the Cardinals. This would be good for football. So incredible player. Not a whole lot else for me to say. Can't wait till he's playing on Sundays.
Hell yeah, dude. I mean, that's where we are. Let's month and change. We'll get there. But we've talked a lot about these receivers, of course. We've talked a bit about Caleb Williams as well. But because we are not a Superflex show, Caleb Williams does not get the limelight. That is reserved for Marvin Harrison Jr. and then Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers. We draft Caleb in the middle of the first, which is still high praise for one quarterback. But when we're talking Superflex 101, this is what it's all about, man. This is what it's all about right here, is getting a player like this. And the discourse around the player is almost shocking.
It's so stupid.
Like, I have never seen a fan, and I know this is not reflective of the Bears fandom as a whole. Like, the internet is not a good place to pull your sample from.
It's not representative.
But I am shocked at how many people on the internet seem to like not want this player.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's like a level of trauma where like you've just been burned so many times that you can't believe that this is the one that's going to be right.
What's the thing where like you're in a relationship, but you self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's like I have been hurt so many times I don't want to be hurt again.
Yes,
I think that's
exactly.
where they're at.
Exactly. I truly believe that's real. Like I for as long as I've been alive, the Bears have been looking for the quarterback. There's been some guys that have come through that were fine. They haven't had a guy that was to match up with, the bitter rival, the Packers, decades of high-end quarterback play. The Bears have never had that. Caleb Williams to me is that player. And I don't care that he's only a prospect, that this is a projection, that there's, things about his game that need to be cleaned up, whatever. When you watch the player play, you're thinking too hard if you don't walk away saying, I would bet on this guy. Because some players just make it look different. It just looks different for some guys. It doesn't look clean either. Like, I had this conversation this week. Like, some athletes, they're like transcendent of the fundamentals of the sport. Like, they don't need to follow the rule book. Most of them do. But then you have this group of players that's like, I can kind of just do what I want, and it really works out. And I'm going to keep doing that. I think that's Caleb Williams in a nutshell. I don't think it needs to look like other quarterbacks. I don't think it needs to look clean and perfect and, always in structure and all of this. I think the player is just different at his core. I think his arm talent's different, and I think everything follows from there. I have so much confidence in him to be the guy in Chicago for a long time. And he's an easy number one pick.
Yeah, this is one that I did not really have to think about. Like, there's a question, Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think that it should be a question because, like, the Bears are going to have their guy. And that is not great, like you mentioned, for, the people in the division, us, like, as Packers fans. Like, I don't want to have to play Caleb Williams twice a year. I don't understand why there's discourse around this player, like such strong discourse, and like why it had to be, Justin Fields versus this player. And like, I get it, whatever. Moving beyond that, we're beyond that stage of the cycle, and we're into now. Caleb Williams is like, there's a 90% chance he's going to be your quarterback, and you should feel great about that. And they are doing all the right things to break the wheel of what this franchise has done with quarterbacks, where you're getting, like, the Keenan Allen acquisition is something you don't do unless you're a win now team, but they're doing it because they're thinking, like, hey, we want as many players in the building to help Caleb Williams as possible. And I think that this team is ready to roll, and Caleb Williams is going to be, fantastic day one. So I think that there's going to be, over-analysis of these players, because that's how it goes when we don't get to watch them for another however many months. But man, they should be feeling great. There shouldn't be discourse, and like, they shouldn't be upset about what's going on right now, because they were not the worst team in the league. They have the number one pick, and they're getting Caleb Williams.
Doesn't get much better than
count your blessings.
It doesn't get much better than that, man. So,
and your GM is making the right moves. So
yeah,
hey,
good time to be a Bears fan. That's not a phrase you hear often. So, and there it is. That is 12 players in Superflex. I will recap my 12. You can list yours, and then we will dive in a lightning fashion.
Do you want to list them at the same time, so it's really easy to listen
Yeah.
on three?
3, 2, 1. I had Caleb Williams number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. number 2, Drake Maye number 3, Malik Nabers number 4, Rome Odunze 5, Jayden Daniels 6, Brock Bowers 7, Brian Thomas Jr. 8, AD Mitchell 9, Michael Penix Jr. 10, Keon Coleman 11, and Troy Franklin 12.
I had Caleb Williams 1, Marvin Harrison Jr. 2, Malik Nabers 3, Rome Odunze 4, Jayden Daniels 5, Drake Maye 6, Brock Bowers 7, Keon Coleman 8, Troy Franklin 9, Brian Thomas Jr. 10, AD Mitchell 11, Malachi Corley 12.
All right, so that's the 12. We won't go through 13 to 24 in detail, but why don't you list off the players right now in your second round, and we can talk about it from there.
Yeah, so I have Braylon Allen just outside of the first round, and then I got J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Jonathan Brooks, Ladd McConkey, Audric Estime, Jalen Wright, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Blake Corum, Javon Baker, Xavier Worthy.
The running backs in this class are like the big thing for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like trying to understand them, even in a vacuum. Like we're in alignment with RB1 being at 13 in Superflex. You want me to read mine? Or should we?
Yeah, let's just fire them off.
Okay, so my second round range: Trey Benson 13, Jonathan Brooks 14, J.J. McCarthy 15, Ladd McConkey 16, Jalen Polk 17, Xavier Worthy 18, Bo Nix 19, Jermaine Burton 20, Ricky Pearsall 21, Jared Verse 22, Leatu Latu 23, Audric Estime 24.
The hell is Bo Nix doing there?
So, okay, hear me out. Bo Nix enters the range, and this is where I broke my own rule.
Oh, boy.
Because I think there is a greater than 50% chance that Bo Nix is a first-round quarterback. If that happens, can't leave him out of the top 2 rounds.
Fair enough.
I said I wasn't going to think like that, and I didn't with the top guys. Nix was a guy that I feel like it just needed to be said. Like, he's going to be in the second round of Superflex drafts. If that happens, this might even be low. Like, and it should be low because I'm lower on the player. Like, It should be low compared to what you might see elsewhere. McCarthy too. Like, we're in alignment on McCarthy, but like there is a world where that's a first round Superflex player. And you know, again, we don't have to have this conversation. I feel like we have it a lot because it's like the nucleus of the discourse this year, JJ McCarthy, but like the player, he's very developmental in a very different way than Drake Maye is developmental. That, you know, that is not the same in terms of where I'm at. Like you have folks like, oh, the Vikings could trade up to 3 and take McCarthy. And it's like, trade up to 3 and take Maye.
Yeah.
Because you're not the level of development that needs to happen there is a completely different thing. So I still like the player. I still like him in the top end of the second round in Superflex, just because I think that the talent, there is something there where it's going to take time and the return on investment is not going to be immediate. If all goes to plan, at least, like he shouldn't start right away. So like, this is kind of baking in the like year of sitting. Is like he's a second round player because we don't like to be patient, even though we play Dynasty. But yeah, the running backs is the big question here, because I'm like, where's that tier 1 fall? Where does that tier 1 fall, and where does tier 2 start? Because where did you have RB3? Was that Estime?
Jonathan Brooks. Oh no, Estime is at 18.
Okay. And
So
see, I had tier 2 running backs starting at the very end of the second, and it felt wrong. But I'm like, I don't know what to do with these players. There's just too many good wide receivers.
yeah, I mean, that's really the story. Is this wide receiver class is so good, it's going to push the running backs down the board. Like, it's not. I mean, it is an indictment on the running back class. Like, the running back class is not very good, and we've kind of outlined that. But on top of that, the wide receiver class is so good that, I mean, it's going both ways.
I will say this too. We're gonna understand the makeup of this board a lot more after the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Because the running back value in this class will be established at that point in time. Like, I completely understand that, like, in a vacuum, these players are in the second round. If any of these top guys goes to like a desirable spot on day 2,
Yeah.
you
That's
got to
going to change a lot.
You have to draft them. So, and conversely, some of these wide receivers will go to not desirable spots, and it will become easier to talk yourself into, I'm going to go ahead and take the running back with opportunity over the wide receiver 16 on my board that is now the wide receiver 3 in, wherever. Yep. So it's the nature of the beast, but right now, in a vacuum, based on the talent, we know there's a lot of wide receivers, not a lot of running backs. In Superflex, quarterback is interesting. We have several in the first round, at least 3. I have 4, and then we have a couple more maybe in the second round. I'll put Bo Nix in there for now, but I know
I've got my 2 in the second round, Penix and JJ.
Yeah. So that's it, man.
That's it.
Superflex rankings for the first time in Camp Dynasty history. I hope everybody enjoyed, and also, obviously, these are 100% correct. There's nothing you could possibly disagree with, so at least we're covered there. But of course, I'm kidding, because of course we're going to disagree in a class that is this talented and this deep, and the rankings.
And that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Everybody is coming to conclusions, hopefully with good process, and that's all that matters. We find out after the season starts. That's when right. It really starts.
There's a long time till we know for sure if our takes are correct. So
exactly. And us, we'll be transparent about it. So for now, Collin, we are transitioning to what I like to call here at Camp Dynasty our official path to the NFL draft. Starts next week. It's where we kind of start to shift our focus a little bit away from the players specifically and more toward the oncoming NFL draft, which is now just over a month away.
It's insane. I can't wait. I mean, man, it felt like it was so far away, and now it's right around the corner.
Right around the corner, man. And next week, we are going to do something that we did last year, which is take a look at mock draft landing spots. We will get all of the celebs, the A-listers of the industry together. We will compile their mocks, look at where these campers are falling on their boards in their mock drafts, and talk about the potential fits. So take it one step further from perfect matches. Now we're going to get to talk about a few different fits for each player. Think about how that might change their value, how it might affect them just in terms of performance. It's always fun. So we'll get the big names together. We'll figure it out. There's a lot of mocks coming. We got post free agency, post combine. The mocks are flying, so we should have plenty to work with next week.
Oh yeah. I mean, the free agency stuff. I mean, there's so many implications based on the free agency things, and they didn't even have time to get into it here.
No,
that's how loaded the draft season is.
Draft never sleeps, but free agency changed the whole game. It's like now everything we thought we knew is
And
different.
We'll probably get into that a little more on the next episode as we talk about the specific teams.
Exactly. So looking forward to that. If you enjoyed our first edition Superflex rankings here at Camp Dynasty, be sure to find us on Twitter at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty, and also subscribe to us on YouTube at Camp Dynasty. You can get in touch with us at all of those places. That is why Superflex rankings happened here. It's because folks were in the YouTube comments, on Twitter, asking for Superflex. So that's how we did this. We're always ready to take, your feedback and let us know what you thought of these rankings. Let us know who we're too high on, too low on. It's all part of the fun of draft season. So, of course, if you enjoyed the episode, also be sure to like, rate, review, subscribe, follow, and share the pod feed. So we very much appreciate that as well.
Yeah, start arguments in the comment section, baby. Let's go.
Just rebrand draft season as comment argument season. That's what we're all
That's
about.
really what it is. Twitter reply arguments, comment section arguments. That's the beauty of this thing.
That's it, man. All right. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.